Hi everyone. So since my very first video that I released back in November of 2022 on historical hair care, I have been inundated with questions, hair care questions. Believe it or not, many of these questions are repeated. They're often the same sort of questions. So I thought it would be helpful for me and for you to just make a video answering a few of the top most frequently asked hair care questions to do with my historically inspired natural hair care routine that grew my own hair from chin length to hip length. So that's what I'm going to be going over in this video. That way these answers can actually go out publicly to lots and lots of people and hopefully help more people than if I'm just always answering the same questions through email or DM or whatever it is. If you guys like this video, I will probably make some more hair care FAQ videos in the future because it's just a helpful type of video to make for me and for other people. So before we jump into it, I'd just like to say, bear with me in this video. I am currently almost 38 weeks pregnant. My brain is not functioning at full capacity. I'm somewhat out of breath, so this is just going to be the best I can do. This is probably going to be the last video I manage to film before baby arrives, and I do have some other videos that are already filmed and a couple of them already edited that I think you guys are going to really enjoy that I'm going to be posting after the baby's born. So let's jump into the frequently asked hair care questions. Question number 1. What about hair that is straight and fine? Can I still use this hair care routine? I get this question so many times. So yes, you absolutely can use the same sort of routine, but it's not going to look exactly the way it looks for me. You're going to have to tweak it a bit, especially when it comes to the amount of oil that you use, as well as the types of oils that you use and how often you use oils in your hair. I think a lot of people could be having some issues with the hair care routine simply because they're looking at my first hair care video where I'm giving an example of what a week in my hair care life looks like, and then they're exactly trying to replicate that with their own hair. So they're using castor oil, they're using lots of it, they're using oil every day. And just FYI, I don't even use castor oil every time I detangle my hair or every week. I typically only use castor oil when my hair is very, very tangly, and I don't use oil in my hair every day either. But even if I did, that's what works for my hair. But if your hair is straight and fine, you're just going to want to use oil less often, possibly just once a week as a pre-shampoo or a pre-wash treatment. And you might just want to stick to something very light like jojoba oil. You also may need to adapt the way that you wash your hair, especially if you're finding that you're having a hard time getting oils out of your hair using just the clay wash and the apple cider vinegar. You could just tweak the clay wash and the apple cider vinegar recipes themselves, like you could use a slightly stronger concentration of clay to water or of vinegar to water in your vinegar rinse. It could also simply be a matter of your hair needing time to adjust. That's a big thing, is there is always going to be a transition period when you've been caring for your hair in one certain way with commercial shampoos and products, and then you just go 180 from that. There's going to be a transition period. That's just the way it is. Now, I recently heard from someone who has fine hair themselves, and they found that adding a raw egg to their wash routine, I'm not sure if they added the raw egg right into the clay wash or if they did it separately, but they said that that really did the trick in getting all of the oils out. Not to mention that using raw egg in your hair is actually very beneficial as long as your hair is not protein sensitive. Finally, if you're really having trouble with the clay wash, you could still use clay sort of as a side treatment. Even if you just use clay once a month, it's better than nothing and you're going to get benefits from it. And you could use something to cleanse your hair like a natural sort of soap shampoo bar. Like one of my favorites when I had shorter hair was making my own DIY African black soap shampoo. So African black soap is a certain type of soap. It's made with only like 2 or 3 ingredients, very natural, and it has a lot of health benefits for the hair, and it's just a bar of soap. And so I would chop up that bar of soap and make my own shampoo with it, and I will link a helpful recipe for that in the description if it's something you're interested in trying. Okay, so number 2 most frequently asked question. By the way, these are not in any particular order. This is just the order I'm choosing for today's video. Okay, the next question is, will henna in the herbal hair growth oil recipe color my hair? This is a very frequently asked question. So henna is a natural hair dye. It can be used to dye hair red. And it can also be used for natural body art as well, which is how it's often used in India. But the thing about henna is it only is, at least theoretically, it only releases its hair dye properties in a water-based solution, and actually a somewhat acidic water-based solution. So for example, I have used actual henna hair masks before, or henna hair dyes you could call it, where the instructions say you can add just a tiny bit of oil to the overall mixture, but if you go over this amount, then the dye won't work anymore. It won't be able to release its dye because it'll be too oily of a substance. So when you're just adding a bit of henna to a large solution of just pure oil, I highly doubt that it's going to have a coloring effect in your hair. However, it's always possible, especially if you have white hair, maybe it could have some sort of coloring effect. So in these cases, always do a strand test first. Or if you're super duper worried about it, then you could always sub out the henna for a herb called cassia, which is also known as neutral henna. It's not exactly the same thing, but it has very similar properties. Okay, another frequently asked question that I've been receiving that especially has to do with the fact that I personally only wash my hair once a week, and I tend to think that most people could probably decrease the amount of times that they wash their hair, especially looking back on history and historical women's hair care. They considered washing your hair every 2 weeks to be considered frequent hair washing. And so I've talked about that a lot and how it can benefit hair to be washed less often, but a common question that comes up from people is, well, how do I deal with sweat? Like, I work out every day, I get sweaty. How do I deal with that without washing my hair every day? So I have a few suggestions for this. I don't have a lot of personal experience with this because I don't do sweaty workouts. I have not in many years. Walks are good for me, and some, casual indoor sort of gentle workout stuff. But anyways, if you love working out and you get sweaty on a regular basis, here are my suggestions. First of all, don't underestimate the power of water-only washing. You could just hop in the shower after you have a workout and just rinse out your hair with water, give it a little massage, and I think you'd be surprised at how well that's able to cleanse out any sweatiness from your scalp or your hair. I don't think there's any harm in getting your hair wet every day, as long as you're not actually going in there and like shampooing it every day, and as long as you're very gentle with your hair in how you handle it while it's wet. I don't recommend detangling your hair in the shower or detangling it while it's wet. That's a subject for another video, but yeah, water only rinsing on its own, I don't think there's any problem with that. Now, if you'd prefer not to if you prefer to go full on historical and just not get your hair wet very often, then I have a few other suggestions. Using a boar bristle brush, I have a whole video about boar bristle brushes, is a great way to dry cleanse your hair. It is a great way of carrying any natural oils or any sort of like salt buildup, because really that's what sweat is, right? It's like water and salt, carrying it away from your scalp and just overall cleansing your hair, especially if you use this in conjunction with some essential oils. Probably not straight essential oils. You probably want to mix a little jojoba oil, just a tiny bit, with some essential oils and put that on your ends. Or if you have very greasy hair and you'd rather avoid jojoba oil, you could make your own DIY dry shampoo using cornstarch, a little cocoa powder, and some essential oils. Dust that onto your hair and then go in and brush it with a boar bristle brush. And this is a great way to cleanse the hair without using water and shampoo. Finally, there's a couple hairsprays you can make that can also help with cleansing your hair. The first one is just a simple apple cider vinegar hairspray where you mix apple cider vinegar with a good amount of filtered water, probably some essential oils as well, and you can always just spray this on your scalp, let it dry, and then brush your hair with a boar bristle brush. Another helpful hairspray is one that I have a YouTube short about, and I will link that for you in the description. It's my Ayurvedic herbal hairspray, and it has herbal ingredients in it such as shikaikai, which are known to be like basically herbal shampoos for the hair. So I find using this in my hair is a great way to cleanse it. For example, if it feels oily at the roots, I can spray this at the roots, but I imagine it would also be great for dealing with sweat situations in your hair. Okay, question number 3 is, what is your exact recipe for the Rasool clay wash and the apple cider vinegar rinse? Yeah, I think this is a good question because I am personally a very sort of intuitive person in how I've come to do my clay washes and my apple cider vinegar rinses, especially just since I've been doing it for so long, so I don't necessarily think much in terms of the actual recipe, but I can totally see how if you're new to this, you just want the exact recipe. So here is my recipe for the clay wash. I recommend starting out with 2 cups of filtered water, or you could do 1 cup of filtered water and 1 cup of aloe vera juice, to about 1/4 cup of the Residue clay powder. Now, if you do this and you find your hair still needs a little more cleansing, then you can up the clay powder to 1/3 of a cup and give that a try. Now, the recipe, or the ratio I should say, for the apple cider vinegar rinse is 2 cups of filtered water to approximately 2 to 4 tablespoons of raw unfiltered apple cider vinegar. The reason I give a range of apple cider vinegar is because this really is very dependent on your own unique situation, but I do recommend starting with a less is more approach because it's very easy to overdo apple cider vinegar and it causes your hair to feel brittle and overly clarified. You don't want that. It's better to start off with less and work your way up. But there are certain circumstances where your hair could benefit from using a slightly stronger solution, like if you have very hard water or if your hair is prone to oiliness. Okay, my next question is sort of a bit of a bigger question. It's coming from people who have given the hair care routine a try. Maybe they got all excited, they went out and bought the ingredients, and they're using the clay wash and the apple cider vinegar rinse, and they're experiencing some issues with it. And these issues could fall into one of about 3 categories, usually the questions I receive. And so I'm going to do my best to cover each of these sort of troubleshooting issues that can commonly come up for people when they're switching to this routine. Okay, I'd say the most common issue people have when they are switching from using conventional shampoo to a clay wash, especially if they have straight or fine hair, is that their hair feels more oily than they would like. So the first most obvious answer to this is that it could simply be your scalp adjusting to the new routine. I have no way of telling you how long this adjustment period will take. I mean, I would hope it wouldn't be for more than a month, but I don't know. It really depends on your own unique situation and what you're using before. But it could be just a case of your scalp needing time to adjust to not having these harsh shampoos applied to it on a regular basis. And maybe it's still overproducing oil. Another reason why your hair might feel oily is something I alluded to earlier in the video, is that if you are watching my hair care video, the very first one where I give the demo of what my own hair care routine looks like, and you're just copying that exactly for your own hair, chances are you're using too much oil, because the amount of oil I use for my hair is a lot compared to what most people's hair needs. This is because my hair is longer and it's curly and it's thick, and it often just needs a lot of oil in order for me to be able to detangle it. But most people have the opposite problem. Most people need to use a less is more approach with the oil. This might just look like using oil once a week, a very small amount of it, something like jojoba oil, or even my Herbal hair growth oil. It is a bit of a heavier oil, but as long as you're just using a little bit on your scalp and your ends, you should be fine. But if you're using oil just like all the time, or if you're using castor oil in your hair and your hair is very fine, this could be causing you to have oily hair even after getting out of the shower, after washing your hair could still feel oily because it's just too much oil that your hair can handle. Finally, if you're not using too much oil and you think your hair should be done adjusting and you're still finding that it's just too oily, you could try upping the concentration of the clay wash, upping the concentration of your vinegar rinse. Also be sure that you're doing your clay wash twice, so you don't just do it once. You use half of your solution, you let it sit in your hair for 1 or 2 minutes, you rinse it out, and then you do it again. I know this adds extra time to your shower routine, but it really does make a difference because the clay is so gentle of a cleanser. It really could benefit from using the 2 cycles of it, not just once, if that makes sense. Okay, another problem I hear from people when they've started the routine is something along the lines of they get out of the shower after washing their hair dries, and it feels like it has some sort of residue on it. It feels a bit like clumpy or just kind of like tacky a bit, or maybe they're even noticing some flakes on their scalp. Chances are this is simply due to not rinsing out their clay wash properly. It is something that needs to be rinsed out very thoroughly. And you also need to be sure to be using the apple cider vinegar rinse in conjunction with the clay wash, because this is just adding an extra step to help cleanse all those minerals out of your hair, because the vinegar rinse is obviously acidic. The clay wash is alkaline with all those minerals in it, and so you really need the acidity at the end to get all the clay cleansed out of your hair. Okay, one more issue that I've heard people talk about. They start using these things. Maybe their hair is dealing with a little bit too much oil, and then it's also having this issue where it feels almost like dry and oily at the same time. And I know this sounds contradictory, but I know exactly what these people mean because I know exactly what's going on, most likely, and it's that clay, rastral clay, and apple cider vinegar rinses are both strengthening ingredients for your hair. So strength, when it comes to hair care, is a big topic, but basically in a nutshell, your hair needs a balance of moisture and strength to be healthy. If it's too much moisture, it's just going to be like limp and soggy, like wet spaghetti, like overly cooked spaghetti, I should say. But if it has too much strength and not enough moisture, it's going to be like strong, but to the point where it's more brittle and less manageable and possibly feeling a bit too dry. And this is like raw, uncooked spaghetti. So ideally, you want your hair to be like spaghetti that's just been cooked enough, like al dente spaghetti, so to speak. So most of us could use some more strength in our hair, especially if we've been dealing with repeated hair breakage and our hair not growing past a certain point. And rastral clay is a strengthener, but it's not an overly harsh strengthener. But even though it's a pretty mild strengthening ingredient, it is still a strengthening ingredient. And if your hair is not used to that, it could be reacting to, oh my goodness, we're getting all this extra strength. And then it feels a little more brittle, a little less manageable than it did before, possibly a little bit dry. This could also have to do with the apple cider vinegar rinse. If you're having this problem, I would definitely suggest probably trying a lower concentration of vinegar to water. I mean, take this with a grain of salt, because if you are dealing with excessive oil in your hair, you might not want to decrease your vinegar, but apple cider vinegar is an ingredient that your hair needs a little time to get used to, and it's also very easy to overdo apple cider vinegar. When I first tried it in my hair years ago, I hated it because, first of all, I was using like a fake processed apple cider vinegar. It wasn't raw or organic or anything. But second of all, I was way overdoing it. So you really need to just use only a teeny bit of apple cider vinegar to water. You don't need very much at all. If you overdo it, it's going to make your hair feel overly dry. So we don't want that. Okay, so the last question that I receive a lot, fairly often, is about boar bristle brushes. And I have also covered this question in detail on my dedicated boar bristle brush video, so be sure to check that out. But basically the question is, can I use a boar bristle brush, specifically a 100% boar bristle brush, if I have thick or curly hair? And the answer is yes, you can. The reason why people sometimes have a negative experience with a boar bristle brush when they have thicker hair is because they're kind of going into it with false expectations. They're expecting this to be like a modern hairbrush that's designed to like reach all the way through the hair and penetrate through the hair and detangle the hair all at the same time. But a boar bristle brush is not meant to be a detangling brush. When women use this historically, they would always use it after having detangled their hair, likely with something like a wooden comb. In my case, I use my fingers. A boar bristle brush is not a detangling tool, it is a health and styling tool for your hair. It dry cleanses the hair, it conditions your ends, it cleans your scalp, it smooths the hair cuticle, but it does this best, especially on thick hair, when you're working in small sections at a time and when you're working with hair that has already been detangled. If you try to take a boar bristle brush to thick or curly hair that has not been detangled, first of all, it's not going to penetrate very deep into the hair. Second of all, it's going to create matting, especially on the surface of the hair where you're brushing. And that's not at all what we want. So a boar bristle brush is a great tool, but you do need to know how to use it properly. And the way to use it with thick hair or curly hair is to work in small sections. Now, as it relates to curly hair specifically, a lot of curlies have questions about the boar bristle brush as it pertains to worrying that it will brush out their curls. And the answer is yes, it will brush out your curls to some degree. I think if you do it just a little bit in curls, it can still give your hair like a curly look, but it's more of like a vintage curly look, which I find quite attractive personally. But if you want the really separated curls, like what we see in modern hair, modern curly hair, then you're not going to want to use a boar bristle brush until later in the week. If you're a curly person who likes to wear your hair loose and have your curls looking all nice, like every day pretty much, then you're probably just going to want to use a boar bristle brush right before your wash, like the day before your wash, or even right before getting into the shower. That way you're still getting some benefits from the practice, but you're not ruining your nice curls. Now, if you're like me and you like wearing your curly hair loose on the first couple of days after a wash, but then you kind of get tired of it and you want to put it up, or you want to put it into protective styles for the rest of the time, then you can absolutely use a boar bristle brush once you get to that point where you're wearing your hair up, the curls don't really matter that much anymore, and your curls are detangled and relatively stretched out, so they're easier to work with the boar bristle brush. Okay everyone, those are the questions I wanted to cover in today's video. I hope you got some useful information from this, or at least just reinforced something maybe you'd already heard but you needed to hear it again. Anyways, in the description I will be linking other hair care videos that I've made that relate to these topics, so be sure to check those out if you were intrigued by any of what I said today. It's really just a short version of what I've already said in most of my previous videos. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you love historical natural hair care and historical handmade fashion. And also, if you love the idea of getting your questions answered, be sure to join my YouTube membership program. It's only about $5 a month. Among other perks, which I will mention in a second, you get access to a free Discord chat group that's only for members, and I get in that chat group every day and I answer people's questions. So that's a great way to get in touch with me and have your questions answered. The other perks are that you get 24 hours of early ad-free access to every one of my public YouTube videos, and you get a couple exclusive members-only posts per month, so I definitely recommend checking that out. If you found this information wildly helpful and would like to give me a monetary thank you, there is a super thanks button in the bar below the video, and you can also virtually buy me a coffee using the link in the description. Thank you so much, I really appreciate it. Also, be sure to check out my blog where most of my videos also have a corresponding article on there, and I also have a free weekly email newsletter that you can sign up for. Okay, see you on the next video!